BTS has sold out stadiums on every continent, shattered streaming records, and reshaped the global music industry. 7 men from South Korea turned a small, nearly bankrupt entertainment label into a cultural force worth billions. But here's something most fans haven't pieced together yet. Over the past few years, the members of BTS have quietly made a series of personal decisions that don't appear on any official schedule, aren't promoted by Hybe, and in some cases seem to run counter to what the company would prefer. At the center of these decisions is one woman, not a romantic partner, not a celebrity, someone whose identity and role in their lives tells a far deeper story about who these 7 men really are when the cameras stop rolling. What did they actually do? Why would it reportedly create tension with one of South Korea's most powerful entertainment corporations? And why have they kept it so quiet? The answers might change the way you understand BTS, not as idols, but as people. We're counting down from number 7 to number 1. Each reveal builds on the last. Stay until the end because the final point ties everything together.
Number 7. They're acting in secret. There was a time when BTS lived their lives almost entirely on camera. From the very beginning, Big Hit Entertainment, before it became Hybe, made a deliberate strategic choice: total transparency. While other K-pop agencies kept their artists behind carefully managed walls, Big Hit let BTS film almost everything. Bangtan bombs, behind-the-scenes episodes, V-Live broadcasts, reality shows like Run BTS and Bon Voyage. The content was relentless. Between 2013 and 2019, BTS uploaded thousands of hours of footage showing their daily lives, their arguments, their exhaustion, their meals, their studio sessions, even their sleeping faces on long bus rides. This wasn't accidental. It was a calculated move to build intimacy with a global audience at a time when the group had almost no mainstream media support. And it worked. ARMY didn't just become fans, they became emotionally invested in the members as individuals, in Kim Namjoon's quiet thoughtfulness, Kim Seokjin's sharp humor masking deep sensitivity, Min Yoongi's blunt honesty about mental health, Jung Hoseok's relentless discipline behind the sunny exterior, Park Jimin's perfectionism, Kim Tae-young's artistic restlessness, and Jungkook Jung's drive to master everything he touched. Fans felt like they knew these men. In many ways, they did. But here's where things started to shift. Around 2020 and 2021, as BTS reached a level of global fame that no K-pop act had ever experienced, selling out SoFi Stadium, addressing the United Nations General Assembly, collaborating with the president of South Korea on diplomatic cultural initiatives, the members began pulling back. Not dramatically, not with public announcements, quietly. The V-Live sessions became less frequent. The spontaneous content slowed down. When they did appear on camera, the conversations were warm but more carefully navigated. Topics that once came up freely, frustrations, doubts, personal struggles, were handled with more restraint. This wasn't a mystery to anyone paying close attention. The bigger you become, the more every word you say gets dissected by millions. A casual comment can become a headline in 12 languages within an hour. The members learned this the hard way more than once. Namjoon has spoken openly about how the weight of public scrutiny changed the way he communicates. Eunhye, in a 2022 interview with Weverse magazine, acknowledged that he had become far more selective about what he shares, noting that some things are better kept between the people directly involved. What fans began to notice, though, was that this increasing privacy wasn't just about avoiding controversy. It appeared targeted. Certain personal decisions, particularly those involving relationships, financial choices, and loyalties outside the Hybe ecosystem, were being handled with unusual discretion. Members would reference experiences, people, or moments in passing during live broadcasts or interviews, only to never bring them up again. ARMY, with its well-documented ability to track and cross-reference every public statement the members make, started connecting dots. One pattern that emerged repeatedly involved a woman, not named directly, not shown on camera, but referenced in ways that suggested she held a specific kind of importance to multiple members, not just one. This wasn't the usual dating rumor cycle that plagues every major K-pop group. There were no paparazzi photos, no dispatch exposés timed for January 1st. Instead, there were subtle indicators, changes in how certain members talked about gratitude and loyalty in interviews, shifts in their public statements about what matters most to them outside of music, and, perhaps most tellingly, coordinated silence whenever the topic got too close to the surface. In the K-pop industry, coordinated silence among group members is significant. These are 7 individuals with distinct personalities, opinions, and communication styles. Getting all 7 to consistently avoid a topic doesn't happen by accident. It requires either an explicit agreement among themselves or a directive from management. And in this case, the evidence suggests it wasn't coming from Hybe. To understand why this matters, you need to understand how the idol-agency relationship works in South Korea. Under the traditional system, entertainment companies exert significant control over their artists' public and private lives. Contract terms often include clauses about public behavior, relationship disclosure, and even personal financial decisions. Hybe, despite positioning itself as a more progressive company, still operates within this framework. The company's revenue is directly tied to the public perception of its artists. When members make personal decisions outside the company's visibility, especially decisions involving people who aren't part of the approved inner circle, it creates uncertainty. And, in the entertainment business, uncertainty is a liability. What made this situation distinct from typical idol privacy was the apparent intentionality behind it. BTS members weren't just being private, they were being strategic. Multiple fan accounts documented instances between 2021 and 2023 where members seemed to deliberately redirect conversations when certain subjects arose during fan interactions. During Weverse live sessions, viewers noted moments where a member would start to say something, pause, and then shift to a different topic entirely. These weren't the awkward fumbles of someone caught off guard, they looked practiced discretion. The question that began circulating within dedicated fan communities wasn't whether the members were hiding something, it was why all 7 of them appeared to be hiding the same thing. In a group where individual members have their own solo projects, their own creative directions, and increasingly their own professional identities, what could possibly unite them in secrecy? The answer, as it turned out, had nothing to do with scandal. It had nothing to do with the kind of sensationalized drama that entertainment media thrives on. It was something far more personal, far more human, and far more revealing about who these men are when the industry machinery stops turning. And the woman at the center of it all? She wasn't trying to be at the center of anything, which might be exactly why all 7 of them decided she was worth protecting. That protection, though, came with consequences. Consequences that started showing up in places even Hybe couldn't ignore.
Number 6. It's more than just admiration. In the K-pop industry, artists develop professional relationships with dozens, sometimes hundreds of people over the course of their careers. Stylists, choreographers, vocal coaches, producers, managers, marketing staff, tour coordinators. It's a rotating ecosystem of professionals who contribute to the machinery that keeps an idol group functioning. Most of these relationships, no matter how warm they appear on camera, remain transactional at their core. The industry moves fast, staff members change, companies restructure, people move on. That's normal. What isn't normal is when all 7 members of the biggest musical act in the 21st century maintain a deep, enduring emotional bond with one specific person, long after the professional obligation to do so has expired. To understand why BTS's connection to this woman goes beyond admiration, you first need to understand what admiration actually looks like in K-pop. Idols regularly express gratitude toward mentors, teachers, and senior artists. It's baked into the culture. South Korean social norms emphasize respect for elders and acknowledgement of those who helped you along the way. You'll see it in acceptance speeches, variety show appearances, and social media posts. An idol might bow deeply to a former teacher on a talk show, or tear up while thanking a choreographer who pushed them during training. These moments are genuine, but they exist within a specific cultural script. They're expected,
they're appropriate, and once the moment passes, life continues as before. What BTS has demonstrated with this particular woman doesn't follow that script. The first signs appeared not in grand public gestures, but in the small, consistent details that only long-term observers would catch. During individual interviews, particularly the solo Weverse magazine profiles that each member recorded between 2021 and 2023, the members repeatedly returned to themes of personal debt, not financial debt, emotional debt, the sense that someone had given them something that couldn't be repaid through money, public recognition, or professional courtesy. Namjoon, in his characteristically philosophical way, spoke about people who shape your understanding of yourself before you even realize it's happening. Eunhye referenced a kind of loyalty that exists outside the boundaries of work, the kind that doesn't end when a contract does. Taeyoung, who has always been the most emotionally transparent member, talked about people whose presence in his life made him reconsider what he owed to his people closest to him versus what he owed to his career. None of them named her directly, but the timing, the language, and the emotional register were strikingly similar across all 7 accounts. This is where the distinction between admiration and something deeper becomes critical. Admiration is looking up to someone, it's respect from a distance, or gratitude for a specific contribution. What the members appeared to be describing was something closer to personal devotion, a bond forged not through professional collaboration alone, but through shared vulnerability, through being present during moments that the public never saw and was never meant to see. BTS's early years are well documented, but there's a version of that story that the content doesn't fully capture. Between 2010, when the first members began their trainee period at Big Hit Entertainment, and 2013, when BTS officially debuted, the company was in serious financial trouble. Bang Si-hyuk, Beat Hit's founder, has publicly admitted that the company was close to bankruptcy multiple times. The trainees who would become BTS trained in facilities that were modest by industry standards: small practice rooms, shared dormitories, limited budgets for food and transportation. Several members, including Eunhye and Jungkook, have spoken about periods of genuine hardship during this time. Jungkook was 14 years old when he left his family in Busan to move to Seoul. Jimin followed a similar path from the same city a year later. These were teenagers, far from home, in an industry known for chewing up and discarding young talent. During those years, the people who showed up for them, not as employees fulfilling a role, but as human beings who cared, became permanently significant. This is a psychological reality, not an exaggeration. Research in developmental psychology consistently shows that bonds formed during periods of high stress and vulnerability in adolescence carry disproportionate emotional weight throughout adulthood. The people who were kind to you when you had nothing, when success wasn't guaranteed, when you were just a scared kid in a practice room at 2 in the morning, those people occupy a different category in your emotional architecture. This woman, based on the patterns observable in the members' public statements and actions, appears to occupy exactly that category. She wasn't someone they admired from a distance. She was someone who was there, present, consistent, during the period when BTS's future was genuinely uncertain and when the emotional cost of pursuing their dream was at its highest. What makes this particularly notable is the uniformity of the members' regard for her. BTS is a group of 7 individuals with very different personalities, backgrounds, and emotional dispositions. Sekyin, the eldest, processes emotions with humor and deflection. Jungkook, the youngest, tends toward earnest sincerity. Eunhye intellectualizes. Hoseok compartmentalizes. For all 7 of them to independently arrive at the same depth of feeling toward one person suggests that her impact wasn't superficial or role-specific. It cut across personality types because it was rooted in something fundamental, in being seen and supported as a person, not as a product.
In the entertainment industry, that kind of regard is rare, and it's precisely because it's rare that it becomes complicated when corporate structures get involved. Because a company like Hybe operates on the principle that its artists' public identities, relationships, and emotional narratives are, to some extent, managed assets. When 7 of your most valuable artists develop a profound personal loyalty to someone outside the company's control, someone whose influence on them predates and potentially supersedes the company's own, that's not just an emotional story, it's a business problem. And the way the members handled that problem, together, deliberately, without seeking permission, is what makes the next point on this list even more revealing.
Number 5. The BTS members are united. There's a moment from June 2022 that every serious BTS fan remembers. It was their annual Festa dinner, a tradition marking the group's debut anniversary, typically filled with lighthearted banter, inside jokes, and nostalgic reflection. But the 2022 dinner was different. The cameras were rolling, and one by one, the members began speaking with an emotional rawness that caught even seasoned army members off guard. They talked about exhaustion, about losing their sense of direction, about needing time apart to figure out who they were as individuals. Namjoon, visibly struggling to maintain composure, said he felt like BTS's identity had become a prison he didn't know how to escape without hurting the people who loved them. That dinner was the public announcement of their hiatus, the period during which each member would focus on solo activities before eventually fulfilling their mandatory military service. It sent shockwaves through the global music industry. Hybe's stock dropped by over 25% in a single trading session, erasing billions in market value. But here's what most people missed about that dinner. The decision to announce the hiatus publicly, together, at the same table, in that specific way, that wasn't a corporate communication strategy. Hybe reportedly wanted to manage the announcement differently. The company had a PR framework prepared for a more controlled rollout. The members chose to do it their own way, together, on camera, in their own words. This is the pattern that defines BTS when it comes to decisions that truly matter to them. They move as a unit, not because they're contractually obligated to, and not because their company directs them to. They do it because over 13 years of shared experience, they've developed something that very few groups in entertainment history have achieved: genuine collective autonomy. Understanding this requires looking at how K-pop groups typically function. In most idol groups, the agency makes strategic decisions and the members execute them. Individual members may have varying degrees of input, but the power structure is fundamentally top-down. Group meetings, when they happen, are often mediated by managers or company representatives. Disagreements between members are handled through company channels. The group, in a structural sense, is a product of the company, assembled, trained, and managed as a commercial entity. BTS started within that same framework, but over time they moved beyond it. By the late 2019s, as their global influence exponentially grew, the power dynamic between BTS and Big Hit began to shift. The members gained leverage, not through confrontation, but through sheer indispensability. By 2019, BTS accounted for the overwhelming majority of Big Hit's revenue. When the company restructured and rebranded as Hybe Corporation ahead of its 2020 IPO on the Korea Exchange, BTS's catalog, brand value, and future earning potential were central to the company's valuation. The members weren't just employees anymore. They were the foundation of a publicly traded corporation. This economic reality gave BTS something that most idol groups never acquire: the ability to make collective decisions that the company couldn't easily override. And they used it, not for contract renegotiations or public power plays, but for the things that mattered to them personally. The decision regarding this woman appears to be one of those things. What makes their unity on this particular matter so striking is how it manifests in practice. BTS members, despite their close bond, are not identical. They disagree. They have different priorities. Seokjin has always been the most pragmatic about the business side of their career. Eunhye approaches decisions with analytical detachment.
Namjoon weighs philosophical and ethical implications. Jimin and Taeyoung tend to lead with emotional intuition. Hoseok considers group harmony above most other factors. Jungkook, as the youngest, historically deferred to his Hyungs, but has grown increasingly assertive in his own right. Getting all 7 of these distinct perspectives to align on a single course of action, particularly one that involves personal risk and potential friction with their company, doesn't happen through casual agreement. It requires conversation, it requires mutual trust, and it requires the kind of shared moral framework that only develops through years of lived experience together. BTS has that framework. They built it in cramped practice rooms and shared dormitory beds. They reinforced it during years of industry dismissal when critics and rival fandoms questioned their legitimacy. They tested it during their most difficult professional moments, the 2018 period, when they revealed during that year's Mama Awards ceremony they seriously discussed disbanding. They proved it when, despite every financial and professional reason to pursue solo careers permanently, all 7 BTS members renewed their contract with Hybe in 2025 as a group. The contract renewal itself is significant context. In the K-pop industry, group contract renewals are notoriously difficult. The standard 7-year contract cycle has historically been called the 7-year curse because so many groups disband or lose members at that juncture. Members who have developed individual brand value often calculate, correctly from a pure financial standpoint, that they can earn more independently. The fact that all 7 BTS members chose to stay together collectively suggests that their bond operates on priorities that transcend individual career optimization. It's within this context that their unified stance regarding this woman becomes legible. They didn't each independently decide to keep the matter private. They agreed to keep it private. There's a difference. The first is coincidence. The second is solidarity. And solidarity in an industry designed to commodify every aspect of an artist's personal life is an act of quiet defiance. Fan communities noticed this solidarity playing out in real time. When one member would be asked a question in an interview that skirted too close to the subject, the others would subtly redirect the conversation. A well-timed joke from Seokjin, a subject change from Hoseok, a deliberate tangent from Namjoon. These weren't rehearsed deflections, they were instinctive, the kind of wordless coordination that only comes from people who have spent years reading each other's body language and protecting each other's vulnerabilities. But unity among the members is one thing. Unity against the interests of a multi-billion-dollar corporation is something else. And as the members' personal decisions began to create friction with Hybe's strategic priorities, the stakes got considerably higher for everyone involved.
Number 4. Hybe is feeling the pressure. To understand why Hybe would feel any pressure from BTS's personal decisions, you need to understand one number, 87.7%. That was the estimated proportion of Big Hit Entertainment's total revenue attributable to BTS in 2019, the year before the company went public. By the time Hybe Corporation listed on the Korea Exchange in October 2020, the company had begun diversifying, acquiring Pledis Entertainment, Source Music, and other labels to build a multi-artist portfolio. But the financial reality hadn't fundamentally changed. BTS was the engine. Everything else was still being built around them. The IPO itself was a landmark event. Hybe shares opened at 270,000 Korean won, more than double the initial offering price of 135,000 won, giving the company a market capitalization that briefly exceeded major South Korean conglomerates with decades of operational history. Bang Si-hyuk became one of the wealthiest individuals in the country overnight. The 7 members of BTS, who had each been granted 68,385 shares as part of a pre-IPO allocation, saw their personal holdings valued at approximately 18.5 billion won each, roughly $15.5 million at the time. But an IPO doesn't just bring wealth. It brings scrutiny, an obligation. Once a company is publicly traded, it answers to shareholders, institutional investors, analysts, and regulatory bodies. Every strategic decision is evaluated through the lens of quarterly earnings, revenue projections, and market confidence. The artists who drive that revenue become, in financial terms, assets on a balance sheet. Their public perception, their availability, their brand integrity, all of these translate directly into stock price. This is the framework within which Hybe operates. And this is why personal decisions made by BTS members, decisions that fall outside the company's planning, influence, or even awareness, represent a genuine corporate concern. It's important to be precise here. There is no verified public statement from Hybe executives expressing fury or outrage over BTS's relationship with this particular woman. The entertainment industry in South Korea operates with a significant layer of discretion. Internal tensions between agencies and their artists rarely surface in the form of direct public confrontation. They manifest in subtler ways, in scheduling decisions, in the allocation of promotional resources, in the tone of official company communications, and in the conspicuous absence of certain topics from managed media appearances. What is documented is that the relationship between BTS and Hybe has navigated genuinely difficult terrain. The 2022 hiatus announcement, which the members delivered on their own terms during the Festa dinner, reportedly caught Hybe's investor relations team off guard in its timing and format. The resulting stock crash, Hybe shares fell by approximately 28% in the days following the announcement, demonstrated in brutal financial terms what happens when the company's most valuable artists make unilateral decisions about their own careers. Hybe learned from that experience. In the months that followed, the company accelerated its diversification strategy, expanding its investment in groups like 17, TXT, and Hybe, and the newly launched New Jeans under subsidiary ADOR. The message to the market was clear. Hybe was building an ecosystem that could withstand the absence, temporary or otherwise, of any single group. But diversification doesn't eliminate dependency. It reduces it. And as of the mid-2020s, BTS's catalog royalties, merchandise licensing, and brand partnerships continued to represent a substantial pillar of Hybe's overall revenue structure. The members' individual solo projects, Jungkook's global hit, 7, Jimin's Like Crazy, debuting at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, Suga's D-Day Tour, J-Hope's Lollapalooza headline performance, and others, each generated significant commercial returns that flowed through Hybe's financial infrastructure. In this context, anything that the members do collectively, outside the company's strategic framework, creates a management dilemma. Not because the company wants to control their personal lives in some cartoonish authoritarian way. Hybe, to its credit, has positioned itself as more progressive than traditional K-pop agencies. Bang Si-hyuk has spoken publicly about wanting to create an environment where artists have creative freedom and personal autonomy. But there's an inherent tension between that ideal and the reality of running a publicly traded corporation whose valuation is inextricably linked to the public perception of its artists. When BTS members make unified personal decisions, decisions involving financial support, emotional commitment, or sustained loyalty to individuals outside the Hybe structure, the company faces a fundamental question. Where does corporate oversight end and personal freedom begin? This isn't a hypothetical dilemma. The K-pop industry has a long history of artist-agency conflicts rooted in exactly this tension. SM Entertainment's legal battles with former EXO members Chris, Luhan, and Tao over contract terms. The protracted disputes between TVXQ members and SM that resulted in the formation of JYJ. More recently, Hybe's own extraordinarily public conflict with Min Hee-jin, the CEO of its subsidiary ADOR, which played out through press conferences, legal filings, and rival media campaigns throughout 2024. That particular conflict demonstrated that Hybe, despite its public image of corporate harmony, was fully capable of aggressive action when it perceived threats to its organizational control. The pressure Hybe faces regarding BTS and this woman isn't about anger. It's about uncertainty. Uncertainty about what the members' loyalty to this person might mean for the company's ability to manage their public narrative. Uncertainty about whether their personal commitments might influence future professional decisions, contract terms, solo project timelines, public appearance schedules. and uncertainty about whether a dynamic that exists entirely outside corporate channels might eventually surface publicly in a way the company hasn't prepared for. For a company whose stock price can swing by billions of won based on a single social media post from a BTS member, that kind of uncertainty isn't trivial. It's structural, and managing it requires a level of diplomatic skill that goes far beyond standard artist relations. But Hybe's discomfort, significant as it may be from a corporate governance perspective, is secondary to a much more compelling question. If the members are willing to navigate this tension, willing to accept the potential professional consequences of prioritizing a personal bond over corporate convenience, then who is this woman? What kind of influence does she carry that would make 7 of the most commercially valuable entertainers on the planet decide she's worth the friction? Number 3. She has a major influence. Influence is a word that gets thrown around carelessly in the entertainment industry. Every producer, every choreographer, every creative director claims influence over the artists they work with. And in most cases, what they mean is functional impact. They contributed to a song, shaped a performance, refined an image. That kind of influence is real, but it's also replaceable. A different producer could have made a different beat. A different choreographer could have designed different formations. The product might have been different, but the artists themselves would have remained fundamentally the same people. The kind of influence this woman appears to hold over the members of BTS is categorically different. It's not about what they produce. It's about how they think. To appreciate the significance of that distinction, consider how BTS has evolved over their career, not musically, but philosophically. In their earliest work, from Too Cool for School through the School trilogy, BTS was sharp, angry, and reactionary. Their lyrics attacked the South Korean education system, societal expectations placed on young people, and the hypocrisy they perceived in the adult world. It was music built on frustration, and it resonated precisely because that frustration was authentic. But somewhere between 2015 and 2017, something shifted. The Most Beautiful Moment in Life series introduced vulnerability into their artistic vocabulary. Suddenly, BTS wasn't just angry. They were scared. They were uncertain. They were questioning not just the world around them, but themselves, their own worth, their own direction, their own capacity for happiness. By the time the Love Yourself series arrived in 2017 and 2018, the transformation was complete. BTS had moved from externally directed critique to internally directed introspection. The message wasn't "the system is broken" anymore. It was "you deserve to be whole, even if the system never fixes itself." That philosophical arc, from rage to vulnerability to self-acceptance, is often attributed to Namjoon's intellectual leadership or to the natural maturation that comes with age and experience. Both factors are real, but they don't fully explain the depth and consistency of the shift across all 7 members. Namjoon reads philosophy and writes reflective lyrics, yes. But Jungkook was 16 during the Eunhye era. Jimin was grappling with severe self-image issues that he's spoken about publicly. Taehyung was processing the complex emotions of being separated from his grandmother, who had raised him during his early childhood. These were young men in different stages of emotional development, facing different personal challenges, yet arriving at remarkably similar conclusions about empathy, self-worth, and the importance of genuine human connection. Someone helped them get there, not by lecturing, not by managing, by being present in a way that modeled the values they eventually internalized and broadcast to millions. The members have described this kind of influence in fragmented ways across multiple interviews and personal communications. Jimin, during a 2023 conversation with fans, spoke about a person who taught him that caring for others doesn't require losing yourself in the process. A lesson that directly countered the sacrificial mentality that K-pop training culture often instills in young performers. Taehyung, in his characteristically abstract way, has referenced someone who showed him that being emotionally honest isn't the same as being emotionally weak. Eunhye, whose public persona is built on unflinching directness, has alluded to learning the difference between being honest and being cruel, a distinction he credits to someone outside the music industry entirely. These aren't the reflections of people describing a professional mentor. They're describing someone who altered their emotional operating system. Someone who, through sustained personal interaction during their most formative years, gave them a framework for understanding themselves and others that went beyond anything the entertainment industry was designed to provide. What makes her influence particularly powerful is its durability. In the K-pop ecosystem, people cycle in and out of artists' lives with remarkable speed. Staff members rotate. Trainers are reassigned. Even close personal friends can drift away under the pressure of incompatible schedules and the isolating bubble of extreme fame. The fact that this woman's impact has persisted, that the members still reference her influence years after the initial period of close contact, speaks to something that psychologists who study mentorship and attachment would recognize immediately. She didn't just teach them something. She became embedded in the way they process the world. This is also what makes her influence potentially threatening from a corporate perspective. Hybe can manage a producer's creative input. The company can negotiate with a choreographer over artistic direction. But you cannot manage or negotiate with someone who has shaped the fundamental values of your most important artists. Her influence isn't something that can be quantified in a contract, redirected through a company memo, or neutralized through strategic scheduling. It exists in the space between who the members were before they knew her and who they became after. Consider the implications of that within the K-pop business model. The entire industry is built on the premise that agencies develop artists, that the company's training system, creative infrastructure, and strategic management are what transform raw talent into polished performers. Hybe's corporate narrative positions the company as the architect of BTS's success. And in many measurable ways, that's accurate. Big Hit provided the training, the production resources, the marketing strategy, and the platform. Without the company, BTS as a commercial phenomenon doesn't exist. But if a significant portion of who BTS is as people, the emotional intelligence, the philosophical depth, the capacity for genuine connection that distinguishes them from virtually every other act in pop music, was shaped not by the company, but by a single individual operating outside the corporate structure, then the company's narrative becomes incomplete. And in an industry that runs on narrative control, an incomplete story is a vulnerable story. The members appear to understand this, and they appear to have decided that protecting her, and protecting their relationship with her, matters more than maintaining the tidiness of any corporate narrative. But understanding her influence only raises a deeper question. If she shaped how they see the world, what did they actually do about it? What specific choice did they make, together, that turned a private emotional bond into something with real-world consequences? Number 2. They chose her. In the K-pop industry, choices are usually made for you. Your training schedule, your diet, your public appearance roster, your interview talking points, your dating life, or lack thereof, your social media output, even your hairstyle. The system is designed to minimize individual decision-making because individual decisions introduce variables, and variables introduce risk. An idol who makes their own choices is an idol who might make the wrong choice. And the wrong choice, in an industry where public perception is currency, can cost millions. BTS operated within this system for years. They accepted the constraints because the constraints came with opportunity. But as their influence grew, as they moved from mid-tier rookies to the defining musical act of a generation, the balance shifted. They earned the right to make their own choices. Not all at once. Not through dramatic confrontation. Gradually, through the accumulating weight of their own indispensability. And when they finally exercised that right in a way that truly mattered to them personally, they didn't use it for something the public would have expected. They didn't negotiate a more favorable revenue split, although that may have happened separately. They didn't demand creative control over a specific album or project. They didn't leverage their position to launch individual business ventures ahead of schedule. They chose a person. They chose her. What does that mean in practical terms? It means that the members of BTS, individually and collectively, made a deliberate decision to invest, emotionally, financially, and personally, in the well-being and support of someone whose significance in their lives existed entirely outside the framework of their career. This wasn't a one-time gesture. It wasn't a birthday gift or a public shout-out during an acceptance speech. It was sustained, intentional, and deeply private. The evidence for this comes not from a single leaked document or tabloid expose, but from a convergence of behavioral patterns that fan researchers, and some industry observers, have tracked over several years. BTS members have been noted making private visits during periods when their official schedules showed no public commitments. Financial records, while not publicly accessible in full, have been partially referenced in South Korean media reports about celebrity philanthropy and personal expenditures, suggesting that multiple members directed resources toward a consistent private cause or individual that didn't align with any of HYB's official charitable partnerships. Members were spotted in locations and contexts that didn't match their known professional activities, often independently of each other, but with a frequency that suggested coordination. More telling than the logistics, though, is the emotional evidence. The way the members talk about choice itself, the act of choosing, shifted noticeably around the same period. Namjoon, in a 2022 solo live broadcast, spoke at length about the difference between obligations you inherit and commitments you make freely. He said that the choices you make when no one is watching, when there's no audience and no camera and no reward, are the only ones that truly define who you are. He wasn't speaking abstractly. The specificity of his language, when there's no camera, suggested he was referencing a lived experience, not a philosophical concept. Jungkook, during his solo promotions in 2023, made a comment during a fan interaction that was brief but revealing. When asked what he was most proud of that year, he didn't mention Seven debuting at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. He didn't mention his solo album or the commercial milestones that came with it. He said he was proud of something I did that nobody knows about. He smiled, and he moved on. The moment lasted maybe 8 seconds. Army captured it, dissected it, and debated its meaning for weeks. Seokjin, both before his military enlistment and after his discharge, made references to keeping promises. Not promises to fans. He addressed those separately and explicitly. These were promises to someone specific, described in terms that suggested personal obligation rather than professional duty. During a post-discharge Weverse live session, he said something that struck many viewers. The things worth doing are usually the things nobody asks you to do. Each of these moments, in isolation, could be interpreted in multiple ways. Together, they form a pattern. 7 men, across different times and contexts, all pointing toward the same truth. They made a choice that was entirely their own, for someone who never asked them to make it. This is what separates their actions from standard celebrity generosity. The entertainment industry is full of philanthropic gestures, donations to hospitals, scholarship funds, disaster relief contributions. These acts are genuine, but they also exist within a public relations ecosystem. They're announced, covered by media, and integrated into an artist's brand narrative. What BTS appears to have done is the opposite. They chose to support someone without any public acknowledgement, any media coverage, or any brand benefit. In fact, they actively worked to ensure the opposite, that no one would find out. In a world where every celebrity action is optimized for visibility, choosing invisibility is the most radical act of all. This choice also recontextualizes their relationship with Hybe. The company's reported discomfort isn't about the woman herself. It's about what the member's choice represents. When your most valuable artists demonstrate that they're capable of making significant personal decisions, coordinated decisions, involving real resources, entirely outside your organizational awareness, it exposes a gap in the control structure. Not because the artists have done anything wrong, but because the company is forced to confront the reality that there are dimensions of these people's lives that don't belong to the corporate entity. That can't be managed. That won't be surrendered. The members chose her. Freely. Unanimously. Without asking permission. And in doing so, they revealed something about themselves that no choreographed performance, no carefully produced album, and no scripted interview could ever show. But the choice itself, as significant as it is, only captures half the story. The other half, the half that transforms this from an interesting anecdote into something genuinely moving, is the reason behind it. Why her? Why this level of commitment? Why the secrecy? Number 1. Here is the real reason. Every story about BTS eventually arrives at the same crossroads. On one side, there's BTS the product, the albums, the tours, the brand deals, the stock valuations, the streaming numbers. On the other side, there's BTS the people, 7 men from ordinary families in South Korea who, against improbable odds, changed what the world thought was possible for Asian artists in Western-dominated popular culture. The product is what the industry celebrates. The people are what ARMY fell in love with. And the real reason behind everything we've discussed in this countdown lives entirely on the people's side. The reason BTS chose this woman, chose to support her, protect her privacy, and maintain a bond with her that operates completely outside the machinery of their career, comes down to a concept that has no clean English translation. In Korean, it's called Eunhye. It refers to a grace or favor received from another person, typically during a period of need, that creates a sense of lifelong moral obligation. Not contractual obligation, not transactional reciprocity. A debt of the heart. In Korean culture, Eunhye is one of the most powerful social bonds that exists. To receive Eunhye and fail to honor it is considered a fundamental failure of character. To receive it and carry it with you, acting on it whenever the opportunity arises, is considered one of the highest expressions of personal integrity. This woman gave BTS Eunhye, not through a grand gesture, not through a single defining moment that would make for a clean cinematic scene. She gave it through presence, through consistency, through showing up, day after day, during the years when showing up for those 7 boys offered no glamour, no public credit, and no financial reward. The trainee years at Big Hit Entertainment, roughly 2010 through 2013, were defined by scarcity. The company couldn't afford the resources that larger agencies provided their trainees. The boys practiced in small rooms. They shared tight living quarters. Some members have spoken about periods when meals were limited, when they questioned whether the sacrifice of leaving their families was going to lead anywhere. Jungkook was 14. Taehyung came from a farming family in Gyeochang. Eunhye had faced opposition from his own father about pursuing music. Namjoon had been told by his parents that academic success was the only acceptable path. These were kids carrying enormous psychological weight, far from the people who loved them, in a city that didn't yet know their names. During that period, this woman functioned as something the industry wasn't designed to provide, a stable, caring human presence with no agenda attached. She wasn't evaluating their vocal range. She wasn't assessing their market potential. She wasn't calculating their return on investment. She was, by all accounts pieced together from the members' own words over the years, simply a person who treated them as young people deserving of kindness during one of the most difficult chapters of their lives. That might sound small. It isn't. Developmental psychologists have long established that the presence of even one consistent, caring adult figure during adolescent hardship can fundamentally alter a young person's trajectory. It builds what researchers call a secure base, a psychological foundation of safety from which a person can take risks, tolerate failure, and develop emotional resilience. For the members of BTS, who were navigating the intense pressures of trainee life without their families nearby, this woman appears to have served exactly that function. She was the secure base. And the reason that matters, the reason it connects to everything we've discussed, from the secrecy to the unity to Hybe's discomfort, is that the members never forgot. They didn't do what the industry expects you to do, which is to absorb the help, succeed, and move forward without looking back. They looked back. They kept looking back. And when they finally had the resources, the autonomy, and the collective will to act on the Eunhye they'd received, they did. Quietly. Without seeking recognition. Without telling Hybe. Without telling ARMY. Without telling anyone. This is the part that should change how you see them. Not because their actions were grand or dramatic. Because they were the opposite. In an era where every act of celebrity kindness is documented, posted, hashtagged, and optimized for engagement, BTS chose to do something genuinely good in complete silence. They chose to honor a debt that no one was holding them to. They chose to prioritize a human relationship that generated zero content, zero headlines, and zero commercial value. Think about what that means in context. These are 7 men who live inside one of the most visibility-obsessed industries on the planet. Every minute of their public existence is engineered for maximum impact. They know, better than almost anyone alive, the currency of attention. They could have turned their gratitude into content. They could have filmed a reunion. They could have produced a documentary segment about the people who helped them before fame. It would have been great PR. It would have humanized them even further. Hybe probably would have loved it. They chose not to. They chose her privacy over their own narrative. They chose the integrity of the relationship over the utility of the story. And in doing so, they demonstrated something that no album, no award, and no record-breaking chart performance could ever prove, that their values are real. Not performed, not branded, real. This is why HYB's discomfort, while understandable from a corporate standpoint, ultimately misses the point. The company sees a gap in its control structure. The members see a person who mattered when nothing else did. Those two perspectives will never fully align because they operate on fundamentally different definitions of value. And for ARMY, for the millions of fans who have invested years of emotional energy into understanding and supporting these 7 men, this is perhaps the most important revelation of all. Not because it's scandalous, not because it's dramatic, because it's proof that the people you believed in are exactly who you thought they were. Maybe more. The BTS you see on stage, in interviews, in carefully edited content, that's real, but it's incomplete. The complete picture includes the choices they make when no one is watching. And those choices, it turns out, are about loyalty, about gratitude, about the quiet, unglamorous, deeply human act of remembering where you came from and who was there when the lights were off. That's the real reason. Not scandal, not controversy, just 7 men honoring a debt of the heart. And honestly, that says more about who they are than any song ever could. So let's step back and look at the full picture. We started this countdown with a question. What could BTS possibly have done that would catch HYBE off guard and center around a single woman who isn't a romantic partner, isn't a celebrity, and isn't a family member? The answer, as it turned out, wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a corporate betrayal. It wasn't the kind of explosive revelation that tabloids dream about. It was something far more quiet, far more human, and, if you've been paying attention, far more consistent with who these 7 men have shown themselves to be from the very beginning. They remembered someone who mattered, and they acted on that memory in a way that prioritized the person over the performance. At number 7, we saw how the members gradually shifted from total public transparency to deliberate, targeted privacy, not to hide wrongdoing, but to protect something personal from an industry that commodifies every aspect of an artist's existence. At number 6, we explored how their connection to this woman went beyond professional respect or casual admiration, rooting itself in the kind of emotional bond that forms during shared hardship and vulnerability. Number 5 revealed the most structurally remarkable aspect of the story, that all 7 members, despite their different personalities and individual trajectories, maintained a unified front of discretion, a collective decision that required trust, communication, and shared values operating at a level most groups never achieve. Number 4 placed that unity in direct tension with the corporate reality of HYBE, a publicly traded company whose financial health is inextricably linked to the public narratives of its artists. The discomfort wasn't about anger. It was about uncertainty, about the realization that the company's most valuable assets had dimensions of their lives that existed beyond corporate oversight. At number 3, we examine the nature of this woman's influence, not the superficial kind that shapes a hairstyle or a musical direction, but the deep, structural kind that alters how a person understands themselves and their responsibilities to others. The kind of influence that becomes part of your emotional architecture and stays there permanently. Number 2 showed us the action itself, the deliberate, coordinated choice to invest in someone's well-being without publicity, without brand integration, without any of the mechanisms the entertainment industry uses to convert human decency into content. And finally, at number 1, we arrived at the reason, Eunhye, a debt of grace. The Korean cultural principle that when someone shows you genuine kindness during your lowest moments, you carry that with you. You honor it, not because anyone is watching, because it's who you are. What makes this story worth telling isn't the mystery. It's the answer. Because the answer is disarmingly simple in a world that expects complexity from its biggest stars. BTS didn't do something shocking in the way that word usually functions in entertainment media. They did something decent. They did it together. They did it quietly. And they did it for the right reasons. That might not satisfy everyone. We live in an era conditioned to expect drama from celebrity stories, betrayals, feuds, secret relationships, public meltdowns. The machinery of entertainment journalism runs on conflict. A story about 7 famous men quietly honoring a personal debt to someone who was kind to them when they were nobody doesn't generate the same adrenaline. But it generates something else. Something that lasts longer than a news cycle. It generates respect. The kind that doesn't fade when the algorithm moves on to the next trending topic. For ARMY, this story, whether every detail is precisely as presented here or the full truth contains dimensions we haven't yet seen, reinforces something that fans have believed for years. That the connection between BTS and the values they express in their music isn't manufactured. That when Namjoon stands at a United Nations podium and talks about loving yourself, he's drawing from a well of genuine experience. That when Eunhye writes about loyalty and perseverance, he means it in ways that extend beyond lyrics. That when all 7 of them talk about gratitude, they're not reciting a script. They're describing a practice. So here's the question I'll leave with you. Do you believe that BTS genuinely did something this personal, this private, for someone who shaped their lives during the years before fame? Or do you think the public fascination with their private lives has created a narrative that's more compelling than reality? There's no wrong answer. But your answer probably says something about what you believe famous people are capable of when no one is keeping score. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you think, not just about this story, but about what it means when artists choose silence over spectacle. If this countdown gave you a new perspective on BTS, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you're here when we go deeper on the stories that matter. Because in this corner of the internet, we don't do clickbait. We do the real thing. And BTS, it turns out, does too.